Okay.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to be here. And yeah, we're just going to jump right in. So I'm CrisMarie.
I'm Susan.
And we're going to go ahead.
Put the chat up so we can see, because they might be.
Are you guys? Let's see the chat. I'm just going to scooch it over
There
here.
we go.
Saying hello to people.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to kick this off with a poll. So it's going to be interactive right from the beginning, because we want to know, what's your biggest pain point? What are you dealing with? Your own stress, your relationship stress, meaning at work or home, or your business stress, whether that's because it's slowed down or it's reopening or anything in between. So respond on your screen. We're not going to give you very much. And then you pick one of those and you hit submit. And then Mary Ellen will read us the results as we collect them. Just gonna see, are the results coming in?
They're coming in.
Okay. Never know how that comes out on. We're having fun though.
How about if we close the poll and you give us the results?
Okay, so they're pretty close. The biggest pain point, my own stress is 36%. My relationship stress, work and home, is 27%. And my business stress is 36%.
Wow,
okay.
Pretty evenly.
So, there we are.
Okay.
Personal and business were the highest, I guess. So,
okay, well, thank you for letting us know, because that helps us with what we want to share.
Yes.
And today we are going to give you tools for you reducing your own stress or fear reaction, tips for building those collaborative relationships, both at home and at work, and adapting your business during this time of, we've gone from crisis, we're more into kind of a change process right now. And just a little bit about me. So I'm CrisMarie Campbell, and I have an MBA, and I'm an Olympic athlete. And I was thinking about what, we've been doing this work for 20 years. Before this, I worked at Arthur Andersen dealing with large-scale change efforts. And one of the things that it really resonates for me in this time of uncertainty is other times in my career when I've confronted that. And probably the most dramatic one was when I was training for the Olympic team. And I was on track to be the leader of the boat. I was a rower in 1988. And I had gotten injured. So I couldn't row, and my team was going on and getting faster and faster, and I felt incredibly helpless. I couldn't do anything, and I was getting more and more depressed because my Olympic dreams were slipping away. And this happened 1 month, 2 months. Into the third month, I went into my PT, my physical therapist session, and she said, listen, friend, we're doing a lot to fix your body, but you've got to fix what's going on in your head. And I realized I had really had felt like a victim to what was going on. I felt like I had no choice. And she gave me this book, The Mental Athlete. And what that did is it allowed me to use my body to train, even though I wasn't out on the water and training. And so I had this thing I could do, and I felt so much more engaged. And I had a conversation with the doctor, and I said, listen, I really want to go for it. And he said, well, if you go for it, we'll know it. You'll have an operation. And so I kind of took more charge and went to the camp, Olympic training camp, and made it into the Olympic 8 and went to Seoul, Korea. But a lot of that was because I turned my mindset around. And so often in conflict, crisis, or change, we get kind of pulled under in that uncertainty, and we don't recognize what we can do for ourselves. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
So a little bit about me. Prior to doing the work we do now with businesses and corporations and in the coaching and leadership world, I was a marriage and family therapist. But even earlier, what kind of got me into conflict isn't really that I love conflict, although I do believe that it is life enhancing to surface it and deal with it. And that came up for me when I was actually in my 20s. And I was diagnosed at that time with an advanced cancer process. And my medical team had put me into what was a new protocol. And I just assumed right away, this is going to work. All I have to do is show up, and I'm going to get healthy if I do what they tell me to do. Well, 9 months into that, I was sitting there with my doctor after doing some tests to see how it was going. And she looked at me and she said, it's not working. And we as a medical team don't have another solution. So, you probably have between 3 to 6 months to live. And I remember it was just like the rug got pulled out from under me and I was stunned. And I think I had always assumed somebody was going to tell me what to do and I'd do it and I'd be okay. And I remember walking out of there really getting, I've got to, this is so uncertain. I don't know. And I'm not prepared to just say I have 3 to 6 months. So I started exploring everything from alternative perspectives to psychology, to spirituality, to you name it, I was willing. And I found there were a lot of people who had ideas about what I could do. The interesting thing was no one wanted to talk to each other. The medical team didn't like the alternative team. I had a lot of experts, but they were not expert at talking to each other. And I spent a lot of time saying, look, you're on Project Susan. And I want you talking to each other. So I'm gonna, here's how we're gonna do this. And over the next 7 years, I had three different cancers and eventually I turned my health around. And I look back at it and I think what I learned there was how valuable conflict can be if you actually can engage with it, not from a place that there's just one way to do this, but through the uncertainty to come to new and different ways. And that was kind of what I think brought my health around.
So just to give the context to the people that are watching the recording, Susan and I have been in business for 20 years, and we have worked with leaders and teams to help them surface the conflict and deal with it in a healthy way so that they can get to innovation, creativity, and, great results, bottom line results. We've also, for the last decade together, been working with couples. So our second book was The Beauty of Conflict for Couples. And both of those are available on Amazon. And we actually work with large scale companies like Microsoft, San Francisco Giants, which is the cool one, as Mary Ellen said in the beginning. AT&T, Microsoft, those things, and also smaller companies. We worked with our local Kalispell Oral Surgery or the U.S. Forest Service or a distillery in our area, Headframe Spirits. So, and our stuff has been mentioned, our models have been mentioned on NBC, Shape, Thrive Global today, and our podcasts. So the whole idea, I wanted to say, our foundation of conflict is really the change and crisis and conflict cycle. And so often people are uncomfortable. We all are uncomfortable with those things, crisis, conflict, and change. But it's that uncertainty that is the seat of creativity. If we don't react and pull away from it and get afraid or numb out on it in response to it. So both of those books tell you how to do that in relationships, at home and work. And they also will help you through this process that we're in right now. So we're going to back up and talk about what is happening because we are in the middle of a change cycle.
So we want to talk a little bit about, there was at some point now, and it's getting far enough away that I don't even know, but 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, a couple months ago, where there was a status quo. There was some stability to what we thought was happening in the world and our business. Okay, maybe 4 months ago, depending on where you were in the country and what was happening. And all of a sudden, these foreign elements came into play. There was the virus, the quarantine, then there was physical distancing, working remotely from home, businesses slowing down. Now there's businesses reopening. There's questions about what we need to do about that. There's health concerns, economic concerns. And all of those are foreign elements that come in and create this uncertainty and chaos.
So here's a different view of it. We were going along just fine in January. Foreign elements, January, February, those foreign elements came in that Susan listed. And first what we did is, many people did say, okay, I'll do this for a couple of weeks and then we'll get back to normal. And then there's no resistance, like, no, we really need to get back to normal. And really what it did is we were plunged into chaos. And this chaos is this uncertainty. We don't know we're not in the old world, we're not in the new world, and our productivity goes way down because we're also having to do things like get hand sanitizer and wash your hands all the time and do things in between. And eventually we'll get to a place of integration and a new status quo.
The key to recognize here, though, is that each time we go through this phase and there's a new foreign element, like right now, some places are reopening, some places aren't. it actually does re-engage that chaos, that uncertainty. And it is disruptive in one sense. It also creates a great possibility, but it all depends on how you handle it. And so often I hear people say, I just want it to get back to normal. And, that is actually in that denial and resistance phase. And there is a certain point at which we have to grieve and let go of what was, because we need to invent and be a part of something new.
And that's not what we're used to at all, very much.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we move from chaos to integration, or even make the most of the chaos? And this is from a change guru, William Bridges. And really in this middle zone where we keep kind of winding up anytime there's a new change, you want to identify what is it that you can control. What do you need to understand, especially about reopening? Like, what are the rules of engagement? How is this going to help? What support do you need? And what's your new purpose? It was really easy when we first got into lockdown. It was like, okay, I can control washing my hands. I need to understand the rules of lockdown. And what support do I need? People were reaching out to friends and maybe coaches. And the purpose was to survive this quarantine phase.
And it really was much more, what does it mean to socially distance? How do I define that? What does it look like? And, you could look, to see what was happening on our country's level, on the global level. You could also, we got clear directions from our own government and state what we needed to do. And that, for the most part, I think people could, even though maybe there was resistance to it, there was also like, okay, I know what I need to do. And you could get some understanding. And as things have transpired, it might be, now that we're kind of moving towards reopening, it can become a little more confusing, because there's all these different things that you have to understand. What is it, businesses, how to apply for loans or not loans? How do I do? There's a lot more on the table now than there was before. But we still have to keep coming back to, what can I control? What do I understand right now? And, what kind of support do I need? And what is the purpose? And we keep encouraging people, keep redefining that, because it's very hard if you are thinking, like we've talked to a couple businesses that were like, they were doing big fundraising projects for a 5-year plan. And it's like, okay, we might want to talk about that, but you actually might want to talk about the fact that you just shut down. And there is something that's more immediate that you need to focus on than that fundraising. Yes, you can get to that. And it was interesting that they were very resistant, but eventually they realized, okay, we have to come up with a plan for the next 2 months, 3 months.
And so we're going to talk about the me, the we, and the business. And
I just want to check in, you can interrupt us, right? If there are questions, right?
Mary Ellen, so feel free, if you do have questions, to put them in the chat. Mary Ellen will interrupt us, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, as we go.
Yeah. So this is just another view of you. Here you are at status quo with your beliefs, your feelings, your wants, your context, which was probably a pretty much steady state, and significant emotional events that shape you. So that can be your gender, your where you've lived, what's happened in your past. If you, like for me, I had a lot of trauma in my earlier childhood, which creates a lot of anxiety when things change. So I had a lot more anxiety to deal with at the start of this whole process. That's a significant emotional event. So then these foreign elements come in, and it plunges the individual into chaos, and we tend to react. And we saw people typically have these 4 different types of reactions, and still do when chaos comes up.
I mean, each time that a new foreign element enters, you're likely, if you haven't really been already focusing on how to come down this curve that we're going to talk about, you're likely to have gone into reaction, even with the reopening ideas. And those go into these categories of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
And what we want to let you know is that the science of your anxiety, you're really, it's pretty normal that you would respond to any sort of change. We have an amygdala hijack. An amygdala is that orange part in the size of our brain. It's very ancient, and it reacts pretty quickly, actually very quickly, before your even conscious mind recognizes it. And so any change, it says bear. And what started to happen is bear. Every change was really loud for us. So it has bear or no bear. The bear response plunges us into fight, flight, freeze. And that's when our body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, and it's responsible for kind of reactions, what we saw, people being frantically moving forward and trying everything, organizing their whole house, or collapsing and not wanting to do anything. Those kind of like, oh, I'm really motivated, I'm not at all, or desperate for information, or teary and overwhelmed.
I know there were a number of times, and I can still get into this, where I just keep reading. If one paper doesn't answer the questions the way I think I need them, I'll look to another paper and then another. And I wasn't even realizing that I was cycling through that nearly as much as I was. The other thing, there may be things like you think you spell well, but all of a sudden you're not spelling as well as you did before. So, I'm a horrible speller, so I may have been more concerned if I started to spell well. It was like, oh, that's not normal.
And what this does is it's bringing you up this stress curve and putting you in the fight, flight, or freeze. And you're trying to think, but it's like your CPU is jammed, and it's not very effective. And so you're coming from fear, you're usually thinking right, wrong. When you're in that black and white thinking, you're usually coming from a reactive place. Like if you hear yourself, I have to, I can't, they can't, nobody, always, everybody. Those are global languages. That's that black, white thinking. And it's really an attempt to get control over the uncontrollable.
I mean, the good news about this is it makes perfect sense that you would be having a stress reaction. You are not alone. It's 100% normal, especially in the conditions that we're in right now. So, because, this is a pandemic, it's a global pandemic, and anxiety is more contagious than COVID. Your body reacts with even more so. And whether you had, like we've been doing work with companies that have actually still got a lot of business happening. But there's still, whether you still have your job or you're used to working at home, there's still this level of anxiety that's just happening in our country and in the world, in the globe, that is going to have an impact.
And even if your conscious mind doesn't recognize it, your system is responding to the level of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. And it comes out in various forms, like we were mentioning. For people who have more of that emotional reaction, it may be more that you're feeling depressed, teary and overwhelmed, there's a numbness, or you're arguing, picking fights that you normally wouldn't.
Mentally, people get over rational, like this is just going to happen this way, trying to get control, obsessively worrying. There's trouble making decisions because of all this level of uncertainty. And there's that, Susan was talking about, that desperate for information.
So people who have having more of a physical reaction, they might be talking faster, frantic action, wanting to stay in bed, symptomizing, feeling sick. Now it could be they keep thinking they have the symptoms of COVID, or it could be they're just having other physical symptoms coming up.
I don't know how many times I'm like, I've got that tickle throat. I think I have COVID. So I have definitely been reacting that. This is even more recently. So, and the last one is kind of a spiritual reaction where there's a sense of denial, this really isn't happening, or compartmentalization, or being very righteous, like really getting mad at people who aren't following the rules. That can be that spiritual reaction.
So we want to have you now take a second polling question, and we want you to think about what we were just describing in terms of which of these do you recognize as your common reaction? Physical reactions, mental, emotional, or spiritual?
And just pick one of them and then hit submit, and Mary Ellen will see the results coming in and she can tell us what we're looking at. And it could be that you relate to more than one, but right now I think it's a forced choice. I think you can only answer one of them.
Yes.
And I was thinking about, just even my mental reactions of getting obsessive, worrying about something in the future, like the gentleman that we were coaching at, versus, wait a minute, what's happening right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see remnants of all four coming in to play, but the big ones for me were probably more the mental and emotional, for sure. Mm-hmm. How are we doing on the poll there? What was that?
We're probably good. Somebody's just trying to get in the waiting room.
Oh, okay.
You want me to end the poll?
Sure. Give us some of the stats there.
Okay. So physical reactions are 18%. Mental are 18%. Emotional are 36%.
Wow. Okay.
And spiritual is 27%.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
All right.
I appreciate
So
that.
emotional and spiritual. Yeah.
That's good data for us.
Yeah.
Thank you for responding to the poll.
Yes, thank you.
Now, here's a way to look at what another version of you. Here you are in this box is, let's say, your body, and you have all these things that are going on. You're worrying about work, home, significant emotional events that have happened, the changes, managing all this stuff. And here come those foreign elements, because this was even before, the whole pandemic. And what happens is we react. That energy has to go somewhere. And so it explodes outside of us in one of those reactions that we were just talking about.
Now, in our culture, we tend to want to get power over things. That's how it's like, if I can get control, if I can just take charge and get control of myself or get control of the situation outside of me, we usually tend to think in black and white. There's a lot of rigidity in that. We want to do things. Let me get busy. Let me, if I just do enough today, then I'm going to feel like I've made a difference.
I so relate to that.
Force things to happen. Get directive. Tell people what they need to be doing. Tell them they should have their mask on or not be, physically, whatever it is. And we tend to treat ourselves and others as an object. We tend to define ourselves by our role. I want to be a good parent. I want to be a good business owner, whatever it is. And in that fixed kind of control orientation, there's usually an us and a them. And we tend to get in victim and blame and into perfection about ourselves or about others.
And I know, when I was talking about rowing, I treated my body as an object. And when I couldn't row, I was like, me versus the rest of the team. And I felt so much like a victim. And I actually at the time blamed my coach. And I kept wanting to how can I make myself perfect? And I couldn't actually find a way to do it. But I was desperate to get control over the situation.
And these are also things we have tended to reward in business. We were rewarded in school for having the right answers. So there is a cultural bias towards this is the path to take. Mm-hmm. And it just gets more and more rigid. So, and there is a time and a place where these are not bad things. Like when we went into lockdown, we were asked to control things, do things from a very, don't go outside, don't go, stay 6 feet away, don't hug. And so there was a time and a place. There is a time and a place for this.
And even business is about making things predictable, getting control, being able to serve. So the operations can be quite fixed, and that's a good thing. But it's often a defense and a compensation for and a cover up for our own anxiety, because what we're doing is we're desperately attempting to get control of ourselves, the situation, other people, to survive. That's what it feels like.
And I think this happened going into this crisis and is now starting to even happen as we go out of it. There's a tendency to go right back to those same patterns. If I can just make sure I know exactly what to do, who has to do what, how am I, the rules of the road, the right expert to follow. And it's again going into that same type of defense problem. We may not be paying as much attention to what is the anxiety underlying all of this.
And there is another approach. So we're not saying that's necessarily wrong, but it's just one side of an approach. Mm-hmm. And we call this an empowering option. And it's more adaptive and flexible and will help you grow and respond to the situation, be more creative and resilient and empowered rather than being so fixed and brittle and right, wrong.
And in this case, we're talking about this notion of vulnerability, which, fortunately for Brené Brown, we've gotten a little more willingness to talk about this. But vulnerability, I think people in the past have seen it as a weakness. It is an act of courage to be vulnerable, to be willing to say, I don't know, I'm uncertain, to sit in that uncertainty. It also means we're willing to feel. And a lot of times we've, shifted out of that because we've seen feelings as disruptive, but really what feelings do is put you a little more into that uncertainty. So trying to control them really doesn't work.
And a lot of times, so being vulnerable is being real, feeling and being willing to say and feel that uncertainty versus try to numb against it or get control over it.
And right now it's being in shades of gray because clearly we don't have an expert out there that can guide us through this. It's kind of like my cancer experience. There's, once my doctor said they didn't have anything, I had to draw upon a whole bunch of different experts. And like I mentioned, they didn't particularly care for each other. And I can see that's happening today and on some levels. There's different experts that are saying, no, we have to pay attention to the economy. We have to pay attention to health. We have to pay attention to this, that. Now, if they could move to being not so black and white about it, and we could move to being not so black and white about it, there's a lot of information that can come from there.
Because we've never been through this experience before. Nobody on the planet has been. So there's no one person that has the sense of what the right answer is. So if we stay in that fixed mindset, we're not actually going to collaborate and work together to stay in this more flexible dialogue, having conversations and showing what's being more inclusive of different ideas to get to a new status quo that's actually growth oriented as opposed to fixed.
I was reading in the New York Times, where I've gone at different points I've kind of gone through all sorts of different papers, but they had they were writing about Australia and New Zealand. And what I found interesting about those two countries is one is very conservative, one is more liberal. And yet those have been two of the most successful countries in addressing this. And part of the reason is because they have separated from a partisan position and kind of been able to, I think, move into some growth mindset, even with each other, around how to approach this differently. And, that was a kind of a refreshing article to see.
Even you can see the partisan would be a fixed mindset. The Republicans think this, the Democrats think that, versus even the leader of New Zealand, when she shows up to share what's happening, she's very authentic, more on the growth side, talking about what's happening. She's flexible, yet she still lays down the law about what they need to do. And that's a really powerful leadership approach. And what helps you get from one side to the other is this curiosity and choice, because it is about the movement. It's not about one is better than the other. One side is better than
the other. And I think this is really where the key to grasp here is it's the movement between these two sides and the recognition. I'm going to be over here as a leader. This is where I need to be. I need to give clear directives to my people coming in. Oh, but I also need to be over here when people are having a reaction to it. And so it really is important to see how
the movement between them. So this is just kind of showing you where we are. The foreign elements come in, it plunges us into chaos or uncertainty. So we react, but cusp, what can you control, understand, what support do you need, and what purpose is a way to move into more of a response. You can even see the react can be on the fixed side and the response can be more on the growth side. And you can control your reaction to things. So this is where we want to give you some tools to expand and include what's happening inside of you, because that's really the only place you can really control is what your own reaction.
And what we're talking about here is to be able to tolerate more uncertainty, which may not be exactly what you're looking forward to, but it is what we have in store, because there is still so much that is uncertain. So our ability to actually expand and include and tolerate that uncertainty is going to be key to how successfully we move through these next stages.
We actually think that's the number one skill for everyone to develop, is the ability to tolerate the uncertainty. And it's not what we've been trained to do. So some physical tools. One, if you are working from home, creating structure is a really important thing with the family coming in, and you really want to actually get up, make your bed, shower and dress, create a schedule, plan your meals and sit down and have them. So often we're eating in front of the computer. Make time for connection and fun, and limit social media and news, especially if it really wires you up. Those are some basics for working at home.
The other thing, and this is, one of these free renewable resources, breathe. And actually something that we tend not to take as much advantage of. I mean, actually, one of the things that was interesting about COVID is it attacks at the lungs, our respiratory system. We have, the better capacity we have to really take in a full breath of air and then actually release it. And we have not this is something you really have to work to do, because most of the time we're sort of doing life support breathing. Let's just get by.
And even if we take it to the fixed and growth mindset, breath actually is what's massaging you from the inside out. It's actually increasing if you do it deeply, it will increase your actual flexibility on the inside. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people don't recognize is it takes 2 minutes to have breath impact your nervous system and help you settle. I mean, one deep breath will help. I'm not saying that, but it will help you come back down that curve to a parasympathetic, the rest and digest response, which actually makes you think more clearly.
And I laugh because, 2 minutes is longer than you think. So I'll just say that, because for me, I always thought, oh, this is easy, until I started to put a timer on it. And then I realized how poorly I really did do the deep breathing and meditative breath. I tended to want to move on quite quickly. And so it helped if I could breathe deeply. For me, it helps if I move a little bit, something to shift so that I actually take that time to do it.
We don't recognize how much our bodies are actually a resource to help our minds be more flexible and have more blood. When we do come down that curve, our brain floods with blood, which helps us think more clearly, see a bigger picture. The other thing, and this is another free thing, nobody even needs to know you're doing it, you can do it right now, is bring your awareness down to your feet. Maybe wiggle your toes or swipe your feet. Another part of this is feel your seat in the chair, and maybe do a little micro rock in your sit bones, but feel the support that's underneath you. So often we interviewed Katie Hendricks, Gay and Katie Hendricks wrote Conscious Loving. He wrote The Big Leap, but she was talking about one of these stress responses where we don't feel, it's called faint, fight, flight, freeze, and faint, where we actually don't feel connected to a bigger picture. This is some of you suffering from the spiritual reaction. So feeling the feet and the support underneath you is one way to come back to, I'm not all alone. I'm a part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. And it's very settling.
It also reconnects you to all your different resources. And that is actually the whole, that connecting place of your fullness inside will also help you connect to the outer world.
And I must do this, I think, like 20 times a day to just bring my awareness, because I can get so out there trying to control things, make things happen on my computer with people. And when I sink back inside, I have access to more of me and my resources.
And this is just, I think listening to music right now and moving is such a wonderful way. And we've been working with so many people who are working from home, who have their children with them now. And this is one way that they can make the transition from being in their office space to the end of the day, is just 2 minutes of music. And different ages can pick the music, and the willingness to just engage in whatever piece of music it is, we're going to move. And that's the transition from office time to home and family time. But, music is a wonderful way to sink in.
And we would give you this, I'm giving you this as homework, to actually do a dance break today and see if you notice if your energy does not shift, because mine always does. Even if I'm like, I don't want to do it, and I actually do it, and it's not about looking good, it's just about moving. Again, that flexibility in your body actually translates to your mind.
The next one is, you notice these, we're going through the sensory pieces, smell and cuddle. Like right now, touch has been taken away from us with other humans, unless they happen to be in our household already. And that's a very important aspect of who we are. I think people are only beginning to realize how important that is as it's been taken away. And, if you can't touch, you don't have someone in your home, your animals, your pets, even textures can be a way to open that sense of touch. And smell is another way. Essential oils. I think people are cooking so much. Yes, sure, the food is great, but I also think they love the smell. It smells so good.
Well, and even the feel of baking. Yeah. But if you're alone, like, this is a very self-soothing. This is what our parents would do to us. Like, oh, sweetie, you're okay. And taking a bath. And that's why when somebody holds your hand, if you're sick at home, they find that the touch of somebody's hand really helps a patient revive, because that helps us in our nervous system. So find ways, if you are alone, to get that. And if you're not, ask your person to hug you and just hold you and see how you feel.
The other thing that's, we tend to think exercise, we've become a culture that appreciates exercise. Now, exercise today at home may look a little more like this, and it could, because you're not necessarily going to get to do your hard and fast workout in the house the way you've done it before. So you have to come up with different ways to continue to engage in some form of exercise. And it's not about pushing it during this time. It may simply be about enjoying a run where, running around the house. We had people that were not moving at all during some of this.
They said, I have 5 steps on my Fitbit. And it's like, oh my gosh, you got to get away from your computer, walk around the outside of your house, walk around the inside of your house.
Do something to help yourself move.
Now we're going to move into mental tools, because a lot of times we can get quite obsessive or scared based on the thoughts that we're telling ourselves.
And this may even be coming up more as time has gone on. And, as you begin to kind of drop into that parasympathetic, your mind may also begin to race more. So
looks like we might have a question. Definitely need to move and get outside in the fresh air and sunshine. Yes, it totally changes the energy. I agree.
Yeah.
Now this is something, our circumstances are not optional, whether we're opening on, have to go back to work, but our fear about it is optional. So our brain is wired to produce 80% negative thoughts. That's how we've survived. And there's actually no neural pathways for positivity. We need to cultivate them through gratitude, through prayer, appreciation. But one of the ways we can interrupt our negative thoughts is to notice our thinking. Because our circumstances, okay, we're reopening. Maybe the thought is, oh my gosh, bad things are going to happen. Then we feel scared. Then we get tight and we don't take inspired action, we take more fear action, and we don't produce the results we want. This is how our brains process information. So here's an example. Coronavirus, I could put reopening in there. I'm going to lose everything. I feel terrified. So I take massive frantic action thinking that's going to help, but really nothing useful happens. This is a pattern that I go through when I'm not aware of what I'm thinking. So a way to intervene on your own behalf is stop your brain and put it on paper. Just take a minute and put all your negative thoughts, limiting beliefs down. Do a thought download is what I call it. And just put them on paper, because you're going to stop your brain, because your brain's so fast. And pick one that you're scaring yourself the most with, the one that's creating the most suffering. And what we want you to do is ask yourself, is it true I'm going to lose everything? Is it true? Can you and actually, after you notice what you respond to, and then take a deep breath, then ask yourself, can I absolutely know it to be true? And you're doing this from a more settled place. And what you're going to get is not your busy mind responding, but a larger part of you responding in a different way.
And it's not, you might get yes again, but it usually starts to
wiggle it
loose a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And then what we want you to do is pick a more neutral, equally true thought. So I'm going to lose everything produces not very good things. But if I say, well, I know that I'm resourceful, well, then I feel a sense of settledness, and I focus on what needs to be doing, and I stay engaged. Much different than staying in that I'm going to lose everything. And what happens is most people are not aware of we're not aware of our thoughts. So we're just in that reactive cycle. So this is a way to interrupt that process. So do a thought download, pick the most painful thought, ask, is it true? It should say, take a breath here. Ask, can you absolutely know it to be true? Pick a more neutral, equally true thought, write it down, and then find evidence. Put that new thought up there. Find evidence today that that thought is true, because your brain will find that evidence.
Right. So, and this does help you stay more response-able. Mm-hmm. So moving into the emotional tools, one thing, get support. Talk about how you're feeling. Express how you're feeling. We have such a we have made emotions bad, which is not helpful. It is important to give permission to your emotions, because if you don't do this, you will, they're going to still come out. Emotions don't just go away. We say they don't go away, they metastasize if you're not careful, if you actually don't address them and deal with them.
And research shows when you do actually talk about how you're feeling, it moves it from the reactive part of the brain to the long-term memory, and it digests.
Mhm.
And so often we've been taught to suppress and repress. And it's right now, it's like keeping a beach ball underwater. It's going to pop back up, just like Susan was saying, and hit you.
I do think, during my years of working with cancer, one of the things because people were always telling me to be positive. And I realized, I wasn't feeling very positive. And it wasn't until I started to actually address all of those other feelings that I was having that I actually even started to feel anything positive. But also, I realized, that was such a huge part of getting my health back. Not to make being angry or, that wrong, but to just feel it, let it move, because it will move on. If you let your feelings come up, they don't stay stuck. It's usually when you're trying to get rid of them that they stay stuck and they go underground.
And it makes perfect sense that you have reason to feel rage even about what you may have, the injustices you see or the situation. Feeling helpless it does trigger our anger, or grief about the loss of business or people or freedoms. So we really want to encourage you to let yourself feel. And we understand people aren't necessarily trained in emotional health. That's not what we've been taught growing up. And ask yourself when you're feeling, if you are really angry or you're feeling a lot of grief or even shame, like, oh my gosh, I failed. Why does it make perfect sense? Really give yourself the benefit of the doubt, because so often you do have every reason to feel however you're feeling.
And the thing about, and this includes the fact that you do need to let yourself express it. If you don't find a way to express it, that's actually where things often turn to a potential for more violence or disruptive choices, because things get stuffed down and you don't feel like you have a choice. And then you just get overridden by your own rage or whatever's happening, versus making a choice to, I can feel this and I can create a safe way for me to express it.
I know for me, anger was Velcroed to violence growing up. And so anger was really scary. But when we talk about this in our Beauty of Conflict for Couples book, how to actually have a Vesuvius for 2 minutes where you're not going to hurt yourself, anybody else. You figure out what language you can say, and then you express it. It feels, afterwards, I feel emotionally intelligent because I've let that energy move through me. It's really powerful.
And when you've been with support and boundaries, meaning you have to find it. And this is actually something I used to do a lot of work with families and young children. And first off, children love to be able to see their parents actually express anger appropriately, because whether you like it or not, they usually see you express it
Passively.
not so passively. And so given, having worked with a lot of families and helping children actually learn how to express their anger, and they actually love teaching their parents, and it'd be very boundary, very clear. And it was actually something that they could see, anger isn't the problem. It's what I choose to do with that anger when I don't take care of it. So,
and don't be afraid of asking somebody to support you, a friend, a spouse, a coach. We have had a lot more coaching during this time because you can do it on Zoom and you feel support, because people don't know how to deal with this level of uncertainty. And there's all these emotions. Learning to digest them with support is really powerful, because you stay in forward, when you process through your emotions, you stay in forward action, your brain stays more bigger picture, and you take more positive approach to things.
And let yourself design, notice this picture. It's not probably going to make it into MoMA or the Museum of Fine Arts, but it is such a wonderful way of, it's so colorful. Who knows, it might. But right now, this isn't about art that's going to go into museums, but it is about expression. And it's so important to find ways to use the whole color palette. Let yourself scribble. Do whatever it takes to move that energy.
And the benefit of allowing whatever we've talked about, allowing yourself vent or cry or express, you will feel more energized, grounded, and clear. It really does refresh your brain when you let that energy move. So now we want to talk a little bit about the spiritual tools. One, in a crisis, we can tend to lose perspective. We think of this as,
this is our life now, instead of this is one scene in the movie of our life. Now, so the things that become important is, one, to connect, to find ways to, through Zoom, through different ways of reaching out to people. There's so many things that have come up in this that, my mother, who's in her 90s, we somehow, and in a home, in a assisted living where she hasn't been able to even get out of her place. They can't do anything. We somehow managed to teach her Zoom. She got on the Zoom with all of my family
it was
members.
kind of scary. She pulled up 2 things, and she said it was the remote and something else, because he said, "Can you find your mouse?" And she pulled up the TV remote and the telephone, and we were a little worried about that.
So, but we walked her through, the mouse is that trackpad. And it was so wonderful to see her expressions when she could see all of us. And it did make a huge difference. So there's just different things that you can do to find that connection. And you may be getting tired of screen time, so pick up the telephone too.
Yeah, there is research of why we get tired with the Zoom, because we're always seeing ourselves, and we were missing some of those cues, and really does feel different to talk to somebody on the phone now. Go old fashioned.
Also, try things like mindfulness, prayer, yoga. These are things you can practice and begin. It will really help you with that breathing, but in different ways to familiarize yourself, to connect inside on a fuller level.
So this is what I was talking about with the grounding. We can lose a sense that we're a part of something bigger. And when we slow down and turn inward, and using prayer and yoga, we have the sense of, could have a sense of feeling we're a part of something bigger. We are not alone. So taking time to do that is very powerful. And again, this is what Susan was saying. This is one scene in the movie of your life. It's not the whole movie. We don't know what the ending will be, but connecting back to the bigger picture. And even with this Katie Hendricks, she was talking about this movement of scooping. Imagine there's a sea of love around you, and you're scooping and you're bringing it into you. And when I do that, I just don't feel so alone. So anything you can do to connect to something higher, bigger. And do things that make you feel good. Comfort, watch fun movies, read kids, bake, puzzle.
Think about what you're grateful for. That'll be a big way to sort of instantaneously shift things.
You cannot be grateful and afraid at the same time. So go back to gratitude. And the benefit is you won't feel so alone. Oh, this is some of the things. We have a podcast, The Beauty of Conflict, where we're putting out episodes about, as we're going through all these different tools. And this is the Katie Hendricks, the Befriending Fear episode. And these are the relationship tools we wanted to give you.
So one thing, communication is really important during this time, even isolated at home. So can you?
Yeah. Oops.
Okay, keep going down. And so, we kind of think about this, that one reason why communication is so important is we need to figure out, what do we need to understand? So at each step of the road, like as our business, we were trying to figure out this loan.
Oh, the PPP.
And there was various levels of trying to understand it. Reading the paper was not helpful. Going to a more big global bank was not helpful. But eventually we kind of narrowed it down to our accountant and our part of the country, which was, helped us kind of downsize it to what did we really need to understand to do this.
And after this is all over, if you're managing people, nobody's going to say, wow, my manager sent me way too many encouraging emails. So you cannot communicate enough support, because, people really want to know that you care and that they're connected to you in some way. And so often we can get so focused on surviving, we may not reach out and connect to people.
And right now, as in where we are, people are making choices about reopening the business, and business owners are trying to figure out how to bring people back in. Some people don't want to come back in, that can be a tough conversation, but the more that there is care and connection in that, the better.
I think there's something in the chat. Oh, somebody just we'll see you.
Okay.
And then if you're a leader, really focusing on both backbone and heart. And this is a lot like the fixed and the growth mindset. So backbone, you need to create structures, short-term measurements, make the call if we're opening, reopening, who's going to come. facilitating online meetings has now become part of your skill set, and giving more feedback rather than less. And on the heart side, it's really checking in with people and letting them know, how are you, asking them how are they doing, and listening to them, showing that care and concern, and maybe adding new types of meetings and really feeling more empathy and compassion. And again, giving more feedback, not less.
Okay, so we have another polling question here. This one, which one because we usually are more comfortable in one or the other in terms of giving, the backbone or the heart skills. So just curious where you guys land.
Just take a moment to either choose one or the other, if you're more comfortable with backbone or you're more comfortable with heart style leadership. Are the answers coming in, Mary Ellen?
Yep. So we have 56% is backbone and 44 is heart.
Well, we're pretty darn balanced. That's good.
Yeah.
And say it again, Mary Ellen.
We're a balanced bunch here, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the main thing here, again, you may notice there is a little parallel between backbone and heart and fixed and growth. And so the key would be, if you can recognize where your strengths are, you also have the option to be able to figure out, okay, well, that's not my natural tendency. How do I shift and move? Because just like with the fixed and growth mindset or control versus vulnerability, backbone and heart, you don't want too much of one or the other. You want to be able to move, and it's the movement between the two that matters.
Okay. And one of the things that we tend to forget when we are leading people is we tend to think of our style. And we want to encourage you to communicate with your staff or people around you based on their style. So, like we've heard from introverts, oh my gosh, I love this time at home. Extroverts are like,
even they're beginning to realize there's some, it's different when you have to do it. No.
So they may be fine with just an email, but if you have an extrovert, you may want to pick up the phone and have a conversation. Concrete or abstract, you get these are if you've done the Myers-Briggs, this is one type indicator, but giving concrete information versus, the big picture, which is the abstract, or rational data or based on feelings, and structured, like I need you to get this done by Friday versus, open-ended.
And you can really apply any style measurement you want to this, because the more any of these can be helpful in beginning to see that we all process information differently. And there isn't like one right way to do it. There's value in all sorts of styles. But understanding styles sometimes takes the personal angst out of it. Like if I know that CrisMarie is more of a concrete, she likes things, she likes to know, how are we going to do that? And I tend to be very theoretical and abstract. It's not that I'm right and she's wrong. It's that, I need to make sure that I don't totally frustrate her. And if she's given me too many details, she needs to know that, how that plays out.
We do this with the teams that we work with, and we're doing a lot more on Zoom, our meetings on Zoom. But one of the things we do when we do work with a team is we have them do we use Myers-Briggs, you can use anything. And we have people share their style. And it does give a lot of like, oh, no wonder we didn't get along, or no wonder you and I always think alike. And it's this is called the fundamental attribution error. If I don't know it's a style difference, I'll attribute what Susan's doing to her character, and I won't feel so good about it. So these are really powerful tools.
We also we wanted to put this here because we think this is really one of the most, if you can get the hang of this. So in the world, we can be relational or we can be right. And we tend to want to be right, which is one of that's back to that control thing. Because in that, if we have the right answer, or at least think we find the right answer, we feel like we have more control, stability, and certainty. When we don't, it's much trickier. But if you want to be in relationship, you really need to shift that. And the key to shifting it is understanding how you got to your story, because most of us think our story is right. And there's really nothing, I hear people say they don't want to be judgmental, but frankly, in business, you were probably hired for being judgmental. You had a good opinion, you were smart, you were a subject matter expert, something along those lines. So it's not that's a problem. It's that we think we're right. And that's actually when it gets us into trouble. So if we can back it up and understand that we take in data, what we see and hear, and it goes through that filter of who we are historically, our significant emotional events, all of those things. And that deletes, generalizes, and distorts all that data. And then we tell ourselves that story. It is just a story.
That's like Susan, when she had cancer, the radiologist said, radiation's going to save you. Surgeon said, surgery's going to save you.
The nutritionalist said, your diet would make all the difference in the world. Now, they each had something that they were certain was going to be the thing that made the difference.
But it was just their story.
Yeah.
Even with a lot of data supporting it, it's just their story.
And so as a result of the story we tell ourselves, we're either open or closed, warm or cold, close or distant. So if we can begin to tease this apart, and then the next part is even more crucial, check it out from a place of curiosity. And because when I share how I put my world together, I am actually offering someone this beautiful tapestry of who I am and how I became who I am. I'm not offering the right answer. I'm just offering you how I put the world together. And this is the thing right now that is so crucial, because we are putting a new world together. We are putting a new way of doing business, a new way of living, because we don't have the old normal. So our ability to be curious, engaged, and interested, that there isn't just one way to put this together, is going to be the thing that helps us collaborate, pull through this, and become creative.
And I mean, this is as simple as, I saw the news that we're reopening. I got your email that said I should come back to work. My story is it's too soon and I feel anxious and I want to check it out. Do I have to come back to work or not? That would be one version of starting a dialogue versus I'm not coming back to work or you can't make me, which is really not creating any dialogue at all. So, and this is just to pay attention to also your at-home team, and checking in with them on clarity of the day and even learning what's working and what's not and what you want to do differently each day.
Because here's the deal, as we reopen, at least where we are, the schools aren't. So there's a whole different problem so far, so that's going to continue to make this home team interesting.
I mean, a lot of the coaching, we've done couples coaching where a lot of the upsetness has been about one partner thinks, oh, you're going to take care of the kids. And so is very strong with their boundaries with the kids. And the other is softer. And so the kids keep bugging that person and having a dialogue about that. So we've facilitated those conversations so they can come up and talk about, come up with routines that actually work for everybody in the family.
And, one of the things that can be most fundamental to this being willing to engage from a different place around the stories is when when I come up against somebody who's very rigid in their beliefs, what I've learned is the thing that opens that door the best is if I can simply find out why it's so important to them that they have the right answer. And it's a simple question. It has profoundly changed marriages. I've seen it change businesses. When somebody will step back and ask the question, I get, this is really important to you. Help me understand why. Because most of the time we're fighting at a strategy point of view about how to do something. And we haven't really gotten down to why it's so important.
So, these are a couple of relationship podcasts. Check it out. We go through that tool. We also have the 555. We have boundary setting and relationship. We've got some episodes that are more current based on today's situation. And this is a free gift that you can get if you actually text 406-350-7691. So if you put that in your phone and you text that number and then you put your name and email, you're gonna talk to our big system in the sky. What's gonna happen is, you're gonna get a reply. And if you put the word spark in it, you're going to get our free workbook for how to set boundaries that stick. And this is just something you can do at home.
To support you.
Yeah. So just text that number. And so the tools for relationships are communicate and use the tool, check it out at home. And so we have another polling question. This is the last one. So we want to know, is your business slowing down, shutting down, or we might even say, or if you've lost your job, The third one, staying the same, growing, or reopening. So go ahead and fill that out now. So number 3 is staying the same, growing, or reopening. We didn't put that in the poll, but we want to
add it.
Yes.
Now that it's
now that it's happening right
Yeah.
now. This is the last poll we'll do. Don't worry.
This could be the fun part.
I
know.
How are we doing? Oh, thank you for putting that in the text or
That's
in the
great.
chat. That's so smart. Okay.
All right. So we are at slowing down 56%. Shutting down or lost your job is 0.
Oh,
Wow,
that's
God.
good.
And staying the same or growing is 44%.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Reopening could be.
I'm
Okay.
actually glad to hear the shutting down was the lowest.
Yeah.
So
Or non-existent with this group.
non-existent.
We're happy
That's,
about
you know,
that. So we do want to talk about the business because there are so many changing conditions. And this is often where we're coming in and facilitating teams to figure out, one, the dynamics, but also the strategy.
So the first thing is really determine what can stay business as usual. And that even means, you know, even if we do reopen, it's not business as it was. And there are a lot of restrictions that need to be put in place to figure out how you're still going to have social distancing, how you're going to work with people who don't want to come back to work. So this is a good thing to kind of really pay attention to for yourself. What can stay the same and what do you want to do differently and have to do differently maybe?
That would be, so looking at what can stay the same and then what to do differently, because that's where you're going to have to change and train and get buy-in for people's behavior. And really pivoting to more short-term goals, because this is going to keep changing because this thing isn't going away, right? This virus, we don't know how to handle it. So even though we're reopening, there's a lot of things. So what are you going to do in the short term? And it may even be week by week, especially as you reopen, or it could be month. Like we've gotten pretty used to now hanging out at home and working from home, but now we're going to be doing a combination of that and really asking the team or yourself, what's most important right now? And we're big believers of getting the team involved in that conversation. So it's not all on your shoulders and you get buy-in by helping people figure those pieces out together.
The other thing is, you know, really asking, this is back to that question, mutual purpose. What problem are we trying to solve? And being willing to have people engage, because you might be fighting over, people may be fighting over strategy. And really what you need to get back to is, why are we stuck here? What are we really trying to get to here? What's the problem? What are we addressing?
Even the idea of, well, we still, you know, getting people aligned. We want to serve our customers in a safe way that keeps us safe and them safe, you know? And so if you ask that question, you might get a lot of creative ideas about how to do that versus the way that you're thinking in your fixed mindset, which we all have at times.
And this, I think one of the things that I think it will begin to shift. I mean, often in business, people talk about their competitors and what are their competitors doing? And, you know, we even named our book, The Competitive Advantage. I think if I could change it, I'd say the collaborative advantage. And I really do hope coming out of this that we think about collaborating, not as a team with suppliers, with your competitors and your customers, because that is going to be the crucial part for us to be able to move through that.
I think it's so often that we're trying to survive, and so we just think about ourselves versus what problem are we trying to solve, and how can we actually pull people in to think creatively about that and make that happen. And also adopt a mindset of learning. Like looking at what's working, what's not, and what do we want to do differently on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, so that you can keep pulling in the things that are helpful.
And this is actually critical across, you know, across states, across businesses, because we tend to want to go, well, that did not work. I mean, look at what Georgia did. I think that was, you know, one of the first states to open. But then there was a great article about looking at, well, somebody from Georgia wrote it. We made a lot of mistakes, but hopefully we can learn from this. Hopefully we can do something different. And we tend to want to go to, well, that was wrong, this is right, versus that learning growth mode.
So just a summary slide, when you can react in these 4 different ways, but then the way to respond is look at what can you control, what do you need to understand, what support do you need, and what's your new purpose. Communicate and check things out, and then pivot to short-term, collaborate, and keep learning, because if anything, to manage this level of uncertainty is learning is really gonna be, and collaborating is gonna be the way through. And then these are just some podcasts for the business side, how to create more engagement with your people. That's a woman who's at Microsoft. And then cognitive bias, noticing how your mind is actually driving your fixed mindset and loosening that. And then that's our wrap up. So if there are any questions or comments, we can open the line, and happy to answer any questions.
We should put the screen, you know, the gallery view up in case someone, yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So if anybody can unmute yourself, and if you have any questions or comments. I think Mary Ellen, you might have to unmute them though.
I think they're shy.
Okay, and that's all right,
that's all right too.
We just wanted to be able to see you, and yeah, if there's anything that you would like to say. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Hi. That was super duper helpful for me personally. I own my own photography studio, and we do social media marketing and websites. So we have 2 kind of different things we're doing. And obviously the social media website part is what's quite busy now, with businesses trying to adapt, but just trying to my own family, because all my kids are home, and you know, managing their fears, our fears. I thought what you talked about today was so helpful, and I just want to thank you for that. I'm going to put a lot of it into use for me as well as my family. So
Great.
Thank you very much.
Good.
I
Yeah.
appreciate hearing that. I think is somebody speaking?
Oh, that's probably somebody unmuted.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I just want to thank you. If there are no other comments, on behalf of the Connecticut River Valley Chamber of Commerce and Pratt and Whitney, I want to thank you for leading in times of crisis, and remind everybody this is Susan Clarke and CrisMarie Campbell of Thrive Inc. And they are the authors of The Beauty of Conflict for Teens, The Beauty of Conflict for Couples. And you saw some of their podcasts that are available. So enjoy them, learn from them, and we just thank you. Oh,
We have a question and comment. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay. Yeah, one question that would love your advice. So here in Connecticut, we're sort of a state in the middle of states that are a little more powerful per se. Massachusetts and New York have already shut their public schools down. We have not. I'm from both those states. All my family are from, saying, how come you haven't shut down? Why? So that leaves the place feeling like sort of helpless, because we're going to possibly get forced to all go back to work May 20th when other states around us aren't, which leads me to wonder if it's sensible, the approaches we're taking in our state. So I kind of wondered what your thoughts of how to sort of calm down over that are. I personally do think, you know, slowing down a little bit is good, especially when I hear NPR stories about the states that return the fastest had the highest mortality rates in the last pandemic. So yeah, I guess what do you recommend on when there's such conflicting news of what to do?
Well, one, I mean, paying attention to your own reaction, I think, is important. Like, oh, I realize I'm in, and then sort of checking in, like, okay, so we may open. What can I do? What are my choices in this? It may be a simple black and white thing. It may not be. You may be able to communicate. Like, I was talking to a woman yesterday who was dealing with this, and one person in her community, she was an acupuncturist, and she's like, I don't think we're ready to go back and do this. And there was another person in her same community who was like boldly going out there. And so it was like helping her walk back, like, you don't have to do what he's doing. You can do something different. And we had a good conversation about how she might be able to do something that stayed within her way. She could work with people in a different way, with not necessarily doing the same acupuncture in the same way, but respecting the distancing, slowly bring that into play. And so that was really, you know, helpful for her to not just go to, oh, okay, now this is how I have to do it, but to keep coming back to what can I do in this that moves me in that direction, but also respects my caution.
And I think connecting, Elizabeth, to really your insides about what feels right. And you can scare yourself. So notice if you're scaring yourself and that, do that thought download, you know, intervene, but then check in, like what really, and honor your choice, because we're all going to respond differently.
And even
Great
here,
advice.
Yeah.
business is doing it very different ways, from very like, you know, I mean, people coming way too close to me in a couple situations where I've just tried to be, you know, I get you're okay with that. I'm still going to move back, not trying, you know, I would like to keep the distance and working on my own, just not like pushing them, you know, like, get away from me, you know, but settling down and just sort of taking my own step back and saying, I got it, you know, and that's helped me, but it is tricky, you know.
It is true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there, were you going to make a comment about something?
I wasn't. But
Okay.
yeah.
Anyone else?
Any further comments?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for your presentation, and how you just answered was spot on, makes perfect sense. I think the fact that half of us on this group our businesses are either staying the same or potentially even growing as a result of this. I think this group in particular in the Connecticut River Valley Chamber is very much forward thinking. And so a lot of people, a lot of its members are about what can we do to be even better. And but what you just said about being true to ourselves with the decisions that we make, that's spot on. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of the coaching that I do, is helping people really sink in rather than all this really coming inside. And because then you feel more aligned inside yourself.
Yes.
You develop that safety inside of you versus out there.
I think in even supporting people who aren't in that same open space, to help them, that's okay too right now. And that can be tricky if you're in the kind of more growth mindset, to help someone be okay with where they are.
In the fixed mindset.
Because that's the only way they're going to get to anywhere different.
Is be okay with where they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
accepting where they are. Yeah.
Just a couple more comments. One was, I loved your presentation, great energy and content. Thank you. And thank you very much, energizing tips.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
Yes.
we
love
welcome you from Montana to Connecticut. We thank you very
Yes.
much. CrisMarie and Susan, and we thank Pratt and Whitney, and I thank everybody who attended, and everybody stay well and good luck when we get through this process.
Which we will.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's the cool
Tuesday, provide coaching. Yes, we do provide coaching. You can email us at thrive@thriving.
Yep.